But Matthew, I am glad that you're coming into the show today from where Hugh Jackman was trapped in the film Prisoners.
And so, yes, it definitely looks like I'm a hostage and I'm trapped. And there's so many other better backdrops that I could have had here, but literally none of them would have been like, oh, quiet, where you could hear me. And just, I thought about doing it outdoors, and welcome to my bunker.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Happy Friday! Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Lawrence Jackson, Jay Croucher. No Matthew Berry. Matthew Berry, it's his birthday. He did it, guys. He made it to 100 years old. Happy birthday, Matthew. As well as happy birthday, Myles Garrett. The birthday boys drink free here at the Happy Hour on Friday.
Boys.
And a real special shout out to Myles Garrett, who clinched Defensive Player of the Year last night, Jay.
Yeah, just about. I've always thought that Matthew Berry is the better pass rusher and Myles Garrett the better fantasy analyst. But I'm glad that Matthew's taking the day off for his birthday. I used to do that as well when I was 7.
I was going to ask, were you allowed to do that when you were a kid?
Yeah, when I was 7.
The first thing I
thought
thought
I was 8,
of,
I wasn't allowed anymore.
When I found out he wasn't on the show today, I was like, oh man, that was a thing you could do. I wasn't allowed to, but it's something you do when you're 5 years old.
So when
You're a dad,
when y'all birthdays come along, you just have to, come back to this day and just kind of shoot a little reminder. Hey, remember on December 29th when Matthew, you were off? We need to be off today.
Fantasy Championship weekend. Yep. There's people out there in the world that are like, I need Matthew Berry more than ever. And he stuck the middle finger up to them and said, well, have fun. I'm on the beach.
Yes, instead he's in his prisoners-like bunker, which he keeps inviting America into, which is terrifying. He wouldn't want to be in Matthew Berry's bunker.
He was looking like a hostage on that. But the good thing about that is, he drinks free. So in his bunker, he'll get the little free drinks served for him.
We will FedEx him some margaritas here from the Happy Hour bar. No Matthew, but Denny Carter. It's Friday. Denny Carter will be joining us later for the Regression Files and the Funnel Report. We don't usually do the Funnel Report. We just say the word funnel 700 times. So we'll actually talk about what the Funnel Report is today as well. As we do every Friday, we're going what's on tap up at the Bud Light bar for the highest game totals. And Jay and Lawrence will give me pickup lines for once. I don't have to cook them up. I actually get the pickup lines delivered to me.
Well, me and Jay we're used to going against each other every Sunday to try to woo Matthew Berry's fantasy football heart. So it'll be. I never got to do this on somebody else before, so it'll be interesting to see how this goes.
Yes.
Not easy.
And not to make things strange, but you are a lot prettier than Matthew, Connor, so I think it might trigger
more
some
incentive.
better
bets will be a little bit better.
Line investigation.
I love it. All right, let's get into our Thursday Night Football fantasy takeaways. If you missed it, the Browns I certainly didn't miss it. The Browns beat the Jets 37-20 last night. The Joe Flacco experience continues. And some people, especially in Fantasy Championship weekend, especially in Superflex leagues, that's great news. For other people, I won't name any names, but one of those happens to be his birthday today, and he's not on the show. Matthew Berry.
Man.
Dropped Joe Flacco, and he dropped Jerome Ford for his fantasy championship in our league that he's already angry about another situation. So this is a tough scene.
It was a tough scene. It was a great text thread of Matthew throwing the toys out the pram.
That's either going to be a championship move or a chump move.
Well, it's not off to a good start.
Man.
Yep,
He's punching air right now in that bunker.
Yep, just the 2 touchdowns and 57 yards for Jerome Ford
through
the air. And then he had it on the ground as well. I mean, I think the story of this, Connor, and I was texting backup producer Pete about this last night, and I don't think you guys have this expression in America, but it's like the Jets, they down tools. They down tools for the season. They put the tools down, they went home, and they just had nothing on defense.
Nothing. In a game where, and I guess we'll get to it in a second, they responded to the first touchdown. Trevor Siemian goes
unbelievable drive
right down the field against the Browns defense, which is regarded as one of the best defenses in the league under Jim Schwartz, and the Jets defense just had no response throughout the game. So for the Browns, they clinched their 3rd playoff berth since the 90s, since 1999, second in 4 years under Kevin Stefanski. Cleveland clinches the 1 seed if this week the Dolphins beat the Ravens, and next week the Browns beat the Bengals, the Bills beat the Dolphins, and the Steelers defeat the Ravens. So a lot needs to happen for them to get the 1 seed, but it's possible as we show you the AFC playoff picture here. And I think more interestingly in this, Jay, because the 1 seed feels like a long shot, but good for the Browns and their fans who are riding high after last night's game in this wild season. Kevin Stefanski joined Paul Brown as the only head coach in Browns history with 10-plus wins in multiple seasons. I mean, this is somebody who is the favorite for Coach of the Year right now and maybe locked it up on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, I think this is a wrap. I don't see how Kevin Stefanski loses after this. The story of this season is so insane. They're the first team to ever start 4 different quarterbacks and make the playoffs. Not only that, but they've clinched with a week to go. They're 11-5, and it's not just the quarterbacks. They're missing their top 3 tackles, not top 2, top 3 tackles. They're missing both their starting safeties. They're banged up on defense. Nick Chubb,
That's
it might
a
be
big
the
injury.
second best running back in the NFL. He went down in the first couple of weeks of the season, so I don't think there is any case against Kevin Stefanski. He had his crowning moment, his coronation last night in prime time. I understand that Dan Campbell with the Lions and their first division title in 30 years, Steichen, McDaniel, Ryans, they're all having great seasons as well, but I think this is Stefanski's. I think this is a wrap. I think minus 275 is value, honestly.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Dan Campbell in comparison, we're looking at it from that point where it's like, oh, the Lions haven't done this in so long, but last season for the Lions with Dan Campbell, like they were on the verge. This was a team that knocked Green Bay out the playoffs. Many people came into this season expecting the Lions to win this division. Now, the Browns, on the other hand, with Deshaun Watson, they were expected to be competitive. But many people thought it would be either the Ravens or the Bengals. So now you eliminate the Deshaun Watson, the Nick Chubb, and like you say, missing the linemen and all these players. The defense is held strong, but they just figured out a way. And it's like when we had the screen up there earlier, there was 3 teams that clinched the playoffs: the Dolphins, Ravens, and Browns. That's crazy to see, knowing that the Chiefs and the Bills are out there and have not clinched. So to your point, Jay, I think he just locked it up.
Yeah, I think it's time. Just quickly on Dan Campbell. I think Dan Campbell's a really good coach. I think that if you want to have him top 3, top 5 for Coach of the Year, that's absolutely fine. But his case for Coach of the Year is that the Lions sucked for the 28 years before he got there.
Right.
Like, he doesn't have anything to do with the fact that the Lions were terrible before he got there. And yes, he's built this program up and he's done a great job. But for me, that his season this year, this is linear improvement for the Lions. They won 9 games and now they're probably going to win 12.
Right, I think that's the key there, Jay, is that if you say Dan Campbell's the Coach of the Year, you're rewarding a rebuild. That's an amazing rebuild. When he got there to the Lions, I mean, it felt like they were hopeless. Obviously, there's been so much wrong for them for a long time. What him and Brad Holmes have done to rebuild them over a stretch of years is great. If you look at Coach of the Year as what happened this season, and you think of adversity and adjusting and all of those things, Kevin Stefanski is the absolute model of that with the adjustments they've had to make. And those adjustments they've had to make have been on the back, literally, of Joe Flacco. And another wild game for Joe Flacco. I think the Jets hadn't allowed a 300-yard passer in like over 30 games. Obviously, Joe Flacco's the guy to break that. And we got to hear from Flacco after the game on the crowd chanting his name.
Yeah, I heard him a little bit. Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, just put yourself in that position. I mean, you can't deny it. It's you know, I said it from the very beginning. I mean, the city's been unbelievable. My teammates have been unbelievable, like in terms of just embracing me onto this football team. So it's all been great, and it makes it that much more special to, you know, be able to come in here and play some good football.
4 straight games for Joe Flacco of 300-plus passing yards last night, 3 touchdowns. As he does, Lawrence, he throws a pick. We were joking off air that it could have been 3 more.
Could have been.
But Flacco's going to keep ripping that thing, man. He's letting it go.
He has an incredible skill of, you know, throwing some supposed to be interceptions, you know, like they go in your hands and you just drop it. But, man, hats off to this dude, man. He has, you know, closed the gap drastically for comeback player of the year. And what I was going to say also, too, is I expected these Browns to have these results, but with Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson and other guys healthy. So for them to have a guy in Joe Flacco who wasn't getting – who the phone wasn't ringing for the guy, you know, to have him here, he's now in the playoffs now, 4th straight game with 300 passing yards. in his 5 games, he's averaged 323 passing yards. Look at him dropping it in the bucket right there. He's doing the players. He's even being a little mobile. You know, he being a little old man mobile too. Last night
right here.
This is the play right here. He gets hit in the face. Quentin Williams chasing him down. Here's Jerome Ford, who Matthew Berry benched in his fantasy league.
Dropped him, Lawrence.
You gotta
Didn't
make
even
those
want him on the
tackles.
roster.
Yeah, didn't even want him on it, and there he goes. But yeah, man, Flacco, 13 touchdown passes and 4 starts, man. So, you know, we talked about him on Wednesday as closing it out on the, on the tab against this Jets defense, man. But he, after this, I don't know if we could keep betting against him until the playoffs.
Yeah.
Until the playoffs.
The thing with Flacco is I think he's like the chaos agent that is a very good fit for this team because their defense is so good. You want to ride that high variance of a guy who will put up points. He'll also put up turnovers. And last night, it kind of gets a little bit lost in the wash that he threw a terrible pick 6. He fumbled twice and he could have thrown 3 or 4 more picks. But I think he is overall, you take it all together, he is playing at a much, much higher level than anticipated. And he clearly has connections with all of these receivers.
Yeah, so let me ask you this, Jay. Has the pendulum swung too far the other way as we sit here and celebrate Joe Flacco? And well earned. I mean, it's one of the best stories in the NFL right now. Off the couch, a guy that really couldn't get teams to return his calls. Do you think that, here we go with some of the questionable Flacco, do you think it's starting to swing too far the other way that, I mean, he's right up against Damar Hamlin for comeback player of the year. Is that an overcorrection at this point?
I think it is. And look, there's a couple of things. One, I can't believe that wasn't picked. One is that with Damar Hamlin, people are looking at his comeback player of the year case through the lens of, well, he's only played a handful of games and a handful of snaps. He hasn't produced on the field relative to these other candidates. I'm sorry, that's just the wrong lens through which to view his case. He literally died on the field and he's come back to play the sport that killed him. Like, it's insane. It's one of the greatest comeback stories in the history of sports. And I get that he hasn't, he's not Kyle Hamilton out there, but the fact that he has taken a single snap, to me, that should clinch the award for him. But the thing with Flacco as well, I get that Hamlin is a strange case and Flacco is a strange case. Let's just compare Joe Flacco to Baker Mayfield. Like, Flacco has played 5 games, Mayfield has played 15. Flacco has 13 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Mayfield has the same number of interceptions at 8. And he has twice his touchdowns, he has twice his wins, he can clinch the division this week. I just don't understand. I get that it's an amazing story, what Flacco has achieved for this Browns team, but like, how do you vote him over even Baker Mayfield when Mayfield has been there the whole season and played at a higher level?
I would say this, we're talking about the award comeback player. Like, Joe Flacco is a player. You mentioned something about Damar Hamlin snaps, and it is an incredibly low percentage. So it's more like, it is more story. Like, I think the odds are how they are right now. If that crazy scenario happens where the Browns end up with this 1 seed,
Sure,
he is winning that award.
Right.
And I kind of look back at Alex Smith when he came back. He didn't die on the field, but his leg did. He came back and the team was dependent upon him for a certain amount of games. Like, he was their starting quarterback. So, and he had a game where he threw for 390 yards. So, for me, looking at the odds at how they are now, I would actually put something on Joe Flacco. I would feel like that's the best value of the 3. Just because Baker, he's about to win the division, but it's the weakest division. Although they have separated, we couldn't figure out which NFC South team was the best. I think it's clear that it's the Bucs right now, but they still have to win it. But if Joe Flacco gets that 1 seed, man, we're talking about something.
I think if Flacco gets the 1 seed, then I think it's probably a different scenario. But the thing is that they're about 40-1 to get the 1 seed, and he's plus 100 to win the award.
Happening.
So I think that ultimately what it comes down to me, Flacco is very similar to Brock Purdy's offensive rookie of the year case last year, where Purdy came in 6 games,
for sure.
Mr. Irrelevant,
Great call
goes
back.
6-0. But he didn't factor into the award because he played so few games.
Right.
And I think the only way you can win this award playing 5 games is if you literally came back from the dead. And otherwise, I think the Flacco will just get compared to Mayfield and the other candidates like Stafford and Tua to a lesser extent. And ultimately, I don't think he's going to win.
Someone that would vote for him, though, is his teammate David Njoku, who had 6 catches for 134 yards. It felt like all of that was in the first quarter last night. I know Sauce
'Cause it
Gardner.
was.
Sauce Gardner covered him in the second half, and it didn't, much didn't happen after that. I think when you look at Njoku right now, guys, this is someone who he's always had the talent. He's a first-round pick. He's a great player, always fantasy relevant. But no Amari Cooper last night, and even when Cooper plays, Flacco is keying in on Njoku and making him an even bigger part of this offense.
I mean, he just looks like an absolute monster. Like, this guy is going to be, I think, a top 5 tight end in drafts next season. And when you think about just the dearth of elite tight ends in fantasy, Njoku has really thrust himself into that conversation. And look, this Jets defense is not what the Jets defense was all season, but still the ability to do what he did bodes incredibly well. There aren't many tight ends with his ceiling.
Yeah, last 4 weeks with Flacco starting, averaging 21 points per game. Those are unheard of numbers for tight ends in fantasy. 100 yards in 2 of his last 3 games. So, and we kind of figured this would be the case without Cooper. But like you said, even with Cooper, that's been their number 2 guy.
Good call from Matthew. He had Njoku over receiving yards as his best bet yesterday. And a great call from Jay, who had Myles Garrett to get a sack on Thursday Night Football as his best bet. Myles Garrett finishes with 6 quarterback pressures on top of the sack. An interesting number, not interesting, just an eye-popping number from Next Gen Stats. Myles Garrett recorded all 6 of his pressures against Mekhi Becton in under 2.5 seconds last night. Garrett is one of 2 pass rushers to generate over 40 quick pressures this season. He has 54. Micah Parsons is the other one with 60. We have a theme going, recapping this game, Jay, of awards being wrapped up. We talked about Stefanski Coach of the Year. We got a little bit into the more debatable one of Comeback Player of the Year. Feels like Myles Garrett is leaning towards wrapping up Defensive Player of the Year. And we've been on this for a while. The Micah Parsons hype over him always felt a little off base, especially factoring in the pricing that Myles Garrett had a game against the Jets offensive line left.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of a strange one because Garrett, he has 14 sacks. That is not usually the same amount that a Defensive Player of the Year edge rusher will get. But I think there is now just the acknowledgement of what he does just beyond his sack numbers, the amount of attention that he gets. Did Becton have 4 penalties last night just purely because he was scared of Myles Garrett?
He kept trying to get off the ball early, false start after false start.
And he was doing it more often.
He had
didn't
to.
get caught
Yeah,
sometimes.
right,
Yeah.
100%.
Garrett's bend, the way that he was able to get so low, and Becton just couldn't get that low. It was insane. So I think that Garrett, I don't think it's a wrap the same way that Stefanski is a wrap for Coach of the Year, but I do think there is still some meat on the bone at minus 235. I think that should be more like minus 300, minus 350. Just because if Parsons goes off tomorrow night and has like 3 sacks against the Cowboys, against the Lions, then I think it's a discussion again if TJ Watt gets the 22 sacks or something. But ultimately, I think the most likely outcome is that the award was won last night.
In this era, too, Lawrence, of advanced stats, and they're not that advanced, but just pressures and quarterback hits being registered just as much as sacks, I think that's where Watt has lost his case because he always has the eye-popping sack numbers, but the snap-by-snap dominance has been ruled by Garrett and to a lesser extent Parsons.
Right, and just when you look at the sack numbers, like you look at a team like the Ravens who lead the league in sacks, but there's no one single pass rusher that you think like, oh man, like it's a collective group,
Right.
So it's not really always about the numbers. The Ravens don't get as much pressure as you would think from a team who leads the league in sacks. So talking about Myles Garrett and TJ Watt, this is the year where Watt, it's more just like it statistically looks good. More, it's like the quarterback conversation. Like we got Lamar at the top right now, and he doesn't have 20 touchdown passes yet, but there's a slew of other quarterbacks that do. When you look at them play, you take into account the penalties, you take into account how it's affecting the defense as a whole. So I think it seems like that's coming into play, for more than one position. And, Defensive Player of the Year is one of those.
All right, as we close out our recap here, a quick note on the Jets, because there's not a lot on the Jets in this one.
How was last night? How was the vibe?
It was great. After watching that, you get in at 3 a.m., you take the dog out, you go to sleep for 2 hours, everything's fine.
The problem was that it was semi a game in the second half. Cleveland couldn't do anything in the second half on offense.
It was very odd how Cleveland's defense, too, it was very Jetsian of them to not be themselves against Trevor Siemian for a little bit of that game as well. I mean, the Anaconda kick return fumble also set it back the other way. It was a mess of a game. But in that mess of a game, guys, as we give a little Jets eulogy here. Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson looking good, especially Breece
love
Hall.
them.
We love them. If you want to know where they rank for next year already, Matthew's way too early 2024 rankings are in his love-hate column from this week, guys. I think, Lawrence, you've only been on with us one other time this week, something Jay and I and Matthew have kicked around. When you look at Breece Hall going into next year, obviously Christian McCaffrey right now is in his own tier in fantasy running backs. Kyron Williams has played his way there.
Yeah.
What we've seen from Breece Hall, without having any real quarterback or offensive line, I mean, where do you stack him up right now in redraft next year?
Well, you mentioned those two guys, CMC and Kyron Williams, and Breece Hall's right there. And then after him, you'll look at some guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, probably Rashad White there. Breece Hall, seeing what he's doing now with the Trevor Siemian, with the Zach Wilson, and then you just think about, because you know the quarterback's going to be Aaron Rodgers next year, right? So you take what Aaron Jones was able to do with Aaron Rodgers those Green Bay years, and they never really freed Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
Like, Breece Hall is going to be that guy. He's going to be that guy there. So just to see what he's been doing these past 2 weeks, like if you had him in the fantasy playoffs this year, he's part of, like, he's carrying you. These are his best 2 games fantasy-wise back-to-back put together. But next year, he could mix it up and get in there in that first-round range where those top receivers start to go, like Tyreek and Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I'm going to make a prediction that I think McCaffrey will be the #1 running back next season, but in terms of actual production, I would not write off Bijan Robinson at all.
I completely
because
agree.
I think that this season it's just been a weird season for Atlanta, and I think that they will figure their stuff out more. And Bijan showed against the
They'll look
Colts what he
different.
can do, and he's going to be a monster at some point. I think there's a very good chance that's next season.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the Rotoworld Player news as you get ready for championship weekend. A lot of injuries to go through, and we start with some good news, which is always nice during our Rotoworld Player news. C.J. Stroud set to return after clearing concussion protocol. Stroud has missed the last 2 games. On top of that, his wide receiver Nico Collins and his left tackle Laramie Tunsil practiced in full on Thursday. Jay, this is an offense that when they have these 3 guys, and it's, you can't replace Tank Dell, but at least with these 3 guys, very viable passing attack.
Absolutely. Against the Titans defense that shouldn't provide too much resistance. Now, this line has actually dropped from Texans -5.5 down to Texans -4. That has nothing to do with the offense. Texans don't have any defensive linemen practicing at the moment. They're all injured. They're all DMPs 2 days in a row, basically. But on offense, I think that backup producer Pete had a really good call that he texted me earlier. Nico Collins is set at 59.5 yards on DraftKings. Like, that's way too low. I'm sorry. The market just doesn't adjust properly when there is a guy missing and Houston has to go elsewhere. And we just haven't seen that much Nico without Tank Dell with CJ Stroud. So I think Nico Collins should be a proper monster this week.
Yeah, I definitely expect Nico Collins with C.J. Stroud to go up from his 4 receptions and 8. He did score the touchdown, but 4 receptions, 18 yards. We fully expect him to up those numbers a lot with C.J. Stroud back on the center.
Over for the Vikings, they named quarterback Jaren Hall, the rookie out of BYU, as the starter against the Packers. Meanwhile, his wide receiver Jordan Addison was limited in practice on Thursday. As we take a look at Matthew's top 10 wide receiver ranks for Week 17, obviously Hall will be under center, and you might ask yourself how that impacts Justin Jefferson. Hall said, "I think I've gotten better in every area since I first got here, but there's obviously a lot still to prove." Justin Jefferson for Matthew still comes in as wide receiver 3, only behind CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill. Lawrence, is a good matchup against Green Bay, especially without Jair Alexander. But how much does Jefferson become limited with the youngster under center?
I don't think much, because when you really think about it, the Vikings, since Kirk Cousins, you had Josh Dobbs. He was okay here and there. You had Nick Mullins, who he's a little more like, I'm a go-getter with the football. But they're backups, and now you getting Jaren Hall, another backup. Remember, this is the guy who originally was the backup for Kirk Cousins this season. That's 1. 2, he's the only one out of Nick Mullins himself and Josh Dobbs who hasn't been benched due to ineffectiveness. So small sample size, but he got off to a very good start against Atlanta before he had that concussion. So not a lot of people will know him, so it'll be easier to be like, whatever. But this is a rookie. You lost T.J. Hockenson, Jordan Addison banged up. Well, who else you going to call on? It's going to be Justin Jefferson. He's definitely the most mobile of all of these quarterbacks. Not the big arm, but smart decision maker. We'll see what happens.
In the same game, the Packers have their own issues at wide receiver with Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks not practicing on Thursday. Jaden Reed was limited, so looking right for Reed. And we move over to the full list of injuries we're tracking going into Week 17 over the weekend. Josh Jacobs still not practicing on Thursday with that quad injury. If you've had Samir White, he's helped you out for sure. Zach Moss limited. Michael Pittman coming out of concussion protocol full. Good sign on Pittman. Trevor Lawrence with the shoulder did not practice on Thursday. Zay Jones was limited in practice. Cole Kmet dealing with the knee. Kyler Murray and Zeke Elliott both are seeing a lot of illness during flu season on the injury reports right now. Kyler Murray has missed the last couple days. Zeke, I'm sure he'll get ready to play in time, but obviously a little concerning on a Thursday status. Juju Smith-Schuster didn't practice with the ankle. Jay, with Trevor Lawrence on that list not practicing Thursday with a shoulder injury, one of many injuries he's had this year, where does your trust go with Calvin Ridley and Travis Etienne, whether Lawrence plays or not?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because Doug Peterson said that Lawrence was going to get in a limited practice. Then he didn't.
Right.
He didn't practice. So
we
that's a bad
opened the
sign.
show saying that.
Yes. So that's a bad sign to start. The line is also dropped from Jags -8 to Jags -6 against the Panthers. In terms of Calvin Ridley, I don't feel. I mean, the thing is this offense has been bad anyway with Lawrence banged up. So I think that Ridley will take a hit without Trevor Lawrence, but I don't think it's complete curtains for him if it is C.J. Beathard at quarterback. Because Beathard, I mean, he's not the most inspiring quarterback in the world, but he did play okay against the Bengals when he got in there. And also with Travis Etienne, I don't think this really hurts his value that much because the Panthers have a terrible run defense. And I think that the Jags would lean on the run more than ever, lean on these Breece Hall type of Simeon dump-off passes to Etienne as well. So I don't think Etienne moves around too much, Linus.
Yeah, Travis Etienne, like you said, I think it hurts more for Calvin Ridley because we've seen long stretches with Ridley, even with Trevor Lawrence, where it wasn't good. But when you get in these situations, just from a football perspective, you definitely want to lean on the run game. And Travis Etienne he's the top 5 running back in fantasy this year. It just don't really seem like it, but you know he is. I do want to ask y'all this. You talked about that line going down from Jags -8 to now -6. The Panthers, they just took it to Green Bay. Didn't pull out the win, but Bryce Young playing the best game of his young career. Being a touchdown favorite, being a touchdown underdog, are these Panthers live for the upset?
I think they are, but interested for your thoughts, Connor, on Bryce Young. Do you think that was just a product of the Green Bay defense, which has been poor, or do you think he made tangible improvement?
If you look at Joe Barry's lack of success against underachieving and just poor quarterbacks this year, there's a track record there. There's a long list. It's really insane.
Yeah,
it feels,
Tommy DeVito got busy.
Right. It feels like his defense is not – it hasn't stopped much of anyone. Packers fans, he's like public enemy number one. Yeah. But I think to Bryce's credit, he played fast, confident, and accurate, and – maybe there's something going now without Frank Reich's staff there that they're trying some new wrinkles or maybe just a new confidence with him having a different voice in the room. I think he looked the closest to Alabama Bryce Young that we've seen in his NFL career. And it makes you wonder if they actually build some skill players around him and an offensive line. He's going to be fine for all the overreactions we had to deal with.
Yep, and if it is CJ, I don't think the CJ Beathard Jags should be 6-point favorites over anyone. To be honest, I think that line will drop if it is Lawrence that goes. But no, I think the Panthers, particularly with the way they're playing on defense at the moment, and it wasn't amazing against the Packers, but they have been improved, particularly in the secondary. I think they're live to win that game for sure.
Let's get to the rest of the injuries we're tracking. Deebo Samuel was limited on Thursday with a neck injury. Brian Robinson was limited coming off of this long hamstring injury. Jamar Chase with the shoulder was limited. That's really interesting with Chase. We didn't know if this could be an extended absence for him, so keep an eye on him today. Isaiah Pacheco with a concussion and shoulder did not practice. Kenny Pickett was back with the ankle injury he's dealt with for a couple of weeks. Najee Harris with the knee was limited after missing practice the day before. Kenneth Walker dealing with a shoulder injury and illness didn't practice. DK Metcalf with a back injury didn't practice. Courtland Sutton in concussion protocol, no practice for him. And Keenan Allen continues to deal with a heel injury that keeps him out of practice. Lawrence, when you look at Sutton in concussion protocol not practicing Thursday, What is this Broncos offense with Jarrett Stidham, not Russell Wilson under center?
Yeah, when you throw a backup quarterback in there, you want to have, it's ideal to have the top receiver in there. It's it's a nice matchup for the Broncos going against the Chargers defense, although the Chargers defense has played a little better lately outside of that Raiders game. So even with Sutton, possibly not playing, like you want to have a practice this late in the week for your star receiver, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see Jarrett Stidham or what Jerry Jeudy could possibly do. But Jerry Jeudy has had games without Sutton as well, and that hasn't amounted to much. We just talked about leaning on the run game in these situations, but Javonte Williams and McLaughlin, they're not those type of running. They're not on the level of an ETN. So it'll be interesting. It will be tough because although the Chargers don't have that great of a defense, they have playmakers on that side of the ball, and the offense as a whole has just been stagnant. It seems like they calling 3 plays. So I don't know if Sean Payton was doing that on purpose for Russell, but we'll see what it's like this week.
Yeah, Stidham had some moments in his brief cameo last season. He can move the ball, but ultimately I think the only Broncos player you'd feel good about starting is Javonte Williams, who, and even then you don't feel amazing about it, but on DraftKings he's set at 58.5 rushing yards, plus 120 anytime touchdown. So from that, I mean, that's 15 yards higher than Breece Hall was set last night in terms of his rushing yards and maybe a 40% chance of a touchdown.
Stidham's last couple games at the end of last year parlayed him into a nice backup quarterback contract.
Yeah.
I mean, he got a 2-year deal worth pretty good
Lit
money.
up the Niners.
Yeah. One bit of news here while we've been on air. Jaylen Waddle officially ruled out with that high ankle. It felt like the Dolphins were playing a little coy this week. We didn't think Waddle would play. Yeah. He's been officially ruled out. We will get to the Dolphins much more for what's on tap, so stick with us. But before we get there, as he always does on Friday, Denny Carter joins us for the Regression Files. And as we always do before we welcome Denny on, we take a look at what he's been up to this week. Always something special.
I've been looking at the holes in my socks for a while, in multiple pairs, right? And I'm talking about significant holes, not just a little threadbare. I'm talking about holes, okay? And I'm thinking, I need new socks, but I know Christmas is coming up. I'm looking at this, in October, November. So I'm like, I'm not buying them. I know Santa will come through. Santa came through. He got me a lot of socks. I don't mean a normal amount. I mean a total retooling of the sock situation. Wow. Also, the underwear that I've been wearing for God knows how long, that's out the door. Wow. And we have slightly larger underwear for a 40-year-old me. So that's wow. That's fine. Amazing. I appreciate it. Thank you, Santa. Shout out to Santa.
Denny, are things okay?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
So you got.
We love Santa.
You got holes in your underwear?
No. Just they may have been too small. Is all I'm saying.
Okay.
You have kids and you turn 40. Suddenly they're too small. I don't know what happened, guys. I don't know what we're looking into that.
Interesting. All right, as he always.
I ain't talking about Denny's holy socks no more.
Yeah, it's really, and I say this in all seriousness, Denny. It's a good day for Matthew to be out celebrating his birthday. I
agree. I didn't anticipate going on TV and talking about my underwear, but here we are, and that's okay.
You never know what backup producer Pete's gonna cook up. He's very Gardner Minshew, Josh Dobbs in that backup way that he could go out there, throw 3 miraculous touchdowns, or he could go out there and you're like, oh boy,
yes,
we're in for
scoreless against the Raiders.
Why is it 0-0 going into the fourth quarter? We don't know. All right,
I'm good with it.
Denny, you always join us on Friday for the Regression Files. Players who are overproducing or underproducing, of course, based on their workload, playing time, and opportunity. If you want to read the full article, go to NBCSports.com. Let's start on a positive note to kick off this Friday, Denny.
Yeah, look, I've had Joe Mixon in the Regression Files in the positive section a few times this year. Folks, he's back in there, and it's because he's run pretty cold in the green zone inside the 10-yard line. I know Chase Brown has made some explosive plays, some splashy plays. Very fast guy, electric guy. I'm going to draft him in every best ball team this offseason. You better bet that. But Joe Mixon is still the guy in the red zone. That's important. He's only scored on 5 of 16 carries inside the 10, and he has not scored on his past 6 carries inside the 10. I think that the Bengals are going to try to be run heavy this week. They tried to do that last week. That means they lean on Joe Mixon. I think that you can start him with some confidence this week that he'll get into the end zone.
Yep, I agree with you there, Denny. In a matchup that perhaps isn't as frightening as it might have been with the Chiefs and their struggling run defense, and also just missing a ton of players at practice this week too. Denny, on the negative side, interested for your thoughts on George Pickens, who went 4 for 195 against the Bengals. Do you think that his 48.8 yards per reception number is sustainable?
Gotta be.
You know, I don't. You know, we've looked into this, me and my interns, and we said, no, for 48 yards a catch, this can't continue, okay? So we've taken a hard stance on that. Yeah, I mean, you knew this was coming because we don't like fun. We don't like big games here at Regression Files. George Pickens did all his damage last week on only 6 targets, guys, okay? So, you know, if you just take that into account, you know that this probably can't last. The problem with Pickens' fantasy profile is that he doesn't get the layups. And by that, I mean, he doesn't get those 6, 8, 10-yard receptions that can kind of smooth over an otherwise volatile performance. He's a boom or bust wide receiver 3. Last week he boomed. I don't think that continues going forward. Mason Rudolph made a couple good throws, and good for Mason Rudolph. You know, hey, he's now instantly better than Kenny Pickett, as is everybody else who starts for the Steelers. And so I just don't think that you can plug in Pickens as like a guaranteed wide receiver 2 or 3.
All right, Denny. Well, as we have some extra time here on this Friday, we usually just do the regression files. But how about the funnel defense report as well? Yeah. Basically, some defenses that could put a team into a pass-happy script or a run-happy script. We start with the Cardinals' run defense, and one note on the Cardinals while we're taping, Hollywood Brown has officially been put on IR. But what does the Cardinals' run defense mean for DeAndre Swift going into championship weekend?
Yeah, so like with the funnel defense report, I try to focus on teams that have been particularly exploited via the run game or the passing attack. The Cardinals, especially over the past month, just have been brutalized on the ground. We saw the Chicago Bears last week go for over 230 rushing yards on the strength of Khalil Herbert, a little bit of Roschon Johnson, a lot of Justin Fields actually. And I think that we're going to see a similar approach from the Eagles this week as their fans beg them to establish the run, to run it like it's 1967. You know, I think they're going to oblige. And I think that's great for DeAndre Swift. You know, DeAndre Swift is handling about 70% of the carries in that backfield over the past 5 weeks. I could see him getting 20 touches pretty easily here, barring some sort of weird game script. You know what? I think that he's going to find the end zone. I think that force field around the end zone that has stopped him in throughout the season, really, I think that force field is going to come down this week. He's going to get in.
Yeah, Denny, I'm definitely with you there on DeAndre Swift. I actually got DeAndre Swift in my optimal flex plays article this week. But like you said, Arizona here has allowed 100 yards to running backs in 6 straight games. So I mean, if you have a running back, and it doesn't matter how you feel about them, if they're playing against the Arizona Cardinals, you let him go off. Arizona's allowed the 4th most rushing touchdowns to running backs to this season. So DeAndre Swift, fall into that end zone, young man.
Please.
All right, moving over to a pass defense. How about New England, Denny? It feels like their run defense has gotten lost in the shuffle because of many reasons. One, Bailey Zappi taking over for Mac Jones, maybe the end of the Belichick era, and of course all the losses New England has dealt with. But as we talk about on this show week after week for it feels like 6 to 7 weeks now, their run defense has been so dominant. Is that going to force Josh Allen and the Bills to go very, very pass-happy in Joe Brady's offense against New England?
I believe so. And I wrote it up in the article, all the boring, nerdy details if you want to check that out. But basically, it comes down to this, okay? The Bills have been operating basically like the Falcons, or even more conservatively than the Falcons on offense over the past 2 weeks. We're talking about like a 33% drop back rate for Josh Allen, which is absurd. The last time these teams played, Josh Allen dropped back 47 times. He threw 41 passes, 12 of those were to Stefon Diggs, okay? And would Stefon Diggs managers like to see a dozen targets this week? I believe so, to get their guy out of a funk. I do think that it's a quietly good spot for this Buffalo passing offense, and I don't think that they're going to be able to just take the air out of the ball like they have over the past 2 games.
You can catch Denny for his live fantasy football Q&A right after happy hour at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. Listen, Denny, it's New Year's weekend. Go enjoy those new socks and underwear, all right?
Oh, I will.
Thank you, Denny.
You better bet it.
Take care of the socks.
See you, Denny.
See ya.
All right, guys, we will take our first break here, and when we're back, we're looking at the games with the highest point totals in what's on tap at the Bud Light Bar right after this. Interested in betting the games this weekend and want a little more insight? Jay and Drew Dinzik have you covered with Bet the Edge, with new episodes dropping every weekday at 6 a.m. Eastern. Jay, what did you guys cover in today's episode?
Talked MVP market, which I think is really fascinating at the moment, and why I think Josh Allen is a viable bet. And then we covered some games, including Raiders Colts, Chiefs Bengals, and Sunday Night Football, Packers Vikings, and what the plays might be in those games, Connor.
All right, every weekday, 6 a.m. If you got to get up and commute somewhere, fire up Bet the Edge. Let's jump into what's on tap, of course, brought to you by Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the NFL. Nothing is as easy to enjoy as a Sunday full of football and a fridge full of beer. Here's the games we're keying in on with the highest point totals of the weekend. And we start with Lions at Cowboys. The Cowboys favored now by 5.5. The over-under for this game, Lawrence, set at 52. And largely that's because the Cowboys are averaging 40 points per game at home this season. That's the best in the NFL. But on the Lions side, does this game environment make Jared Goff an appealing play this week, of course, indoors?
Yeah, definitely. And you look at that game total of 52 there, by far the largest of Week 17 here. You got Jared Goff in that dome. That's what's key here. He averages 19.4 fantasy points per game indoors. 260 yards at least in 3 of his past 5 games, and this is a big game for both of these teams, right? So I expect it to be a back and forth, a shootout, passes galore. Both quarterbacks go for 275, I say, at the very least. So yeah, I believe Jared Goff, he will make do in this game versus the Cowboys.
Yeah, we think about the Cowboys' defense as this really imposing unit, but it just hasn't been for the past month or so. They've really struggled. I think the absence of Trayvon Diggs is starting to show itself more.
Yep.
Now, I think the Cowboys will struggle more against the run, and that's how you've been able to exploit the Cowboys' defense recently. And there's perhaps no better team in the NFL to do that than the Lions. But I think with Goff, if they're able to protect against Micah Parsons, then you can throw on this defense. And
Indeed.
I think that the Lions might have the best offensive line in football outside of the Eagles. So I think that they will keep Goff safe, and this is going to be a shootout.
Jay, what do you think of this line dropping a little bit? It's dropped about a point or half a point, but the Cowboys' dominance at home, Lions are a great team. There's no denying that. They could be the 1 seed, but the Cowboys' dominance at home is why it launched so heavy towards them.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think 4.5, 5, that's about right, just because of the struggles that the Cowboys have had on defense. And we talked about this the other day, but they really miss Jonathan Hankins, and that's a problem. If you're missing Jonathan Hankins this much, that's a problem for your defense. Yeah. And I think that the Cowboys, they will be able to score at will on the Lions, but I think the Lions, this is a good matchup for them just because of how effectively they can run the ball.
Our next highest total is the 49ers traveling to play the Commanders. The Niners are 12.5-point favorites in this one. The over-under set at 50. Another big point total here, Lawrence. And a new quarterback will be under center for Washington in Jacoby Brissett, which more importantly, fantasy-wise, does that change things for Terry McLaurin?
I think it does, and I think it changes it for the better. We've seen what Terry McLaurin has been able to do the past 2 weeks when Jacoby Brissett is entered. It's been scary hours the whole season for Terry McLaurin. But them being 12.5-point underdogs, they should have to throw. We saw the 49ers stump out the Eagles, but yet A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts all had nice fantasy days because they had to come from behind. So, McLaurin with Jacoby Brissett this season is 5 targets, 4 receptions, 122 yards in the TD, almost 2 TDs. He got stopped right at the goal line before one, but I expect Jacoby Brissett to play his type of football. He plays that YOLO football. He gonna get that ball and push it down the field. So I think it'll be better for him per se. A guy like Curtis Samuel, it'll maybe lessen in his favor, but for their top guy, Scary Terry, it's gonna be up for him.
Jay, the 49ers coming off an embarrassing loss. There's no way around it. Is this kind of one of those response games where you could see them just running it up 40 and above?
Absolutely. This is the type of game where Christian McCaffrey has 150 yards and 3 touchdowns and just goes absolutely off. But I do think that this is a defense in San Francisco that just hasn't really touched the heights of when they came out of their bye and they just absolutely destroyed Jacksonville and then Tampa Bay and teams of this ilk, and they really shut down the Eagles even though there was garbage time at the end. But, I mean, the thing with Baltimore is that their passing offense hasn't been great this year, and Lamar Jackson did whatever he wanted in that second half. So I think it's a problem that Arik Armstead has been out. They've been a different defense without him. He's still not practicing. So I do think this 49ers team is vulnerable, and that's why the total is so high, because, look, it's not going to be like a blow-for-blow shootout, I don't think, but I do think the Commanders will be able to move the ball.
If you could protect against them, you got a shot definitely to get something done through the air.
Another game with a high total, the Dolphins at Baltimore. Of course, the Ravens favored by 3.5 points in this one. Expect to be one of the better games of the week. The point total is at 47 here. And Jay, I think the question is, with Jaylen Waddle ruled out, who steps up for Miami?
Yeah, well, I mean, the easy answer is Tyreek Hill, who Matthew has ranked as wide receiver 2. I think that is justified. Think back to the early season matchup between these two teams last year where Tyreek Hill did whatever he wanted against the Ravens secondary. Now, this is a much improved Ravens defense. I don't think Tyreek is going to have that type of freedom, but you would expect that he gets absolutely peppered with targets. But honestly, the two guys who I think benefit the most are Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane, because this Ravens defense, and we've spoken about this, but they look like an amazing run defense because they don't give up that many rushing yards, but they don't give up many rushing yards because teams are never in game scripts where they can run the ball because they're always losing by a lot because the Ravens are so good. But in terms of an efficiency basis, you can run the ball on Baltimore. I think that's how Miami will want to play this game. That's why I kind of like the under in this one too.
Also, too, I like the under as well. Also, too, with that Ravens defense, I mentioned earlier how they lead the league in sacks. That, too, will, keep a team from running the ball when you're in 3rd and long all the time. Also, if you're in dire straits, you're in need, Cedric Wilson will probably be the next receiver to step up. The last 2 games he's played in 77 and 62% of the snaps. So as far as receivers goes, like, that'll be the next guy. But yeah, I mean, that's like if you're like truly struggling. But I think it's going to be tough for this Miami offense because, like you say, last year, and that was early last year, they played them much different in the front 7 for the Ravens this year.
Yep, no Roquan Smith
No
from memory
Roquan Smith, and
that
that
game.
was Kyle Hamilton's 2nd game.
Yeah, he's a different player now, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. By the way, Cedric Wilson, who Matthew dropped Jerome Ford for, so expecting
So he better go off.
minimum 118 yards
2
and 2
catches,
touchdowns.
12 yards.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
going to be very interesting. All right, that'll do it for What's on Tap, presented by Bud Light. Easy to Sunday, easy to enjoy. We are taking one more break, but when we're back, Lawrence and Jay have pickup lines for me, their best bets going into the weekend right after this. Don't forget, on DraftKings Sportsbook this season, new customers can bet $5 and pocket $150 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, all customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay every day. Download the app and use the promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. It is time for last call here, fellas. Let's get into some pickup lines where, finally, I just get to put my feet up and not have to come up with any. Jay, what do you got for me?
Yeah, your hair looks fantastic.
Thank
Connor.
you,
Just wanted to
Jay.
mention
Good
that
start.
first.
Hey,
Yeah.
sticky slick there.
Somebody with hair getting pickup lines for once.
Yeah,
Interesting
wow,
concept.
very good. On his
Yes.
birthday, too.
Yep.
Good shot.
Yeah. Happy
my
100th birthday.
My pickup line is it's the same one I used last week, or it was the Thursday night pick last week. Chris Olave to go for 120-plus receiving yards is plus 600. This just is not, it's not right. It's not correct, because Olave, here is what he has done in his last 4 healthy games. 94 yards, 114, 119, 123. I just don't think that the market is accounting for, one, just the pass funnel that the Tampa Bay defense is, where they just cannot stop anyone through the air all season. Their run defense is excellent. There's no Shaq Barrett. There's no Carlton Davis at practice this week. I think they're really going to struggle to contain Derek Carr through the air. And I just think that with Olave in particular, his player type is just conducive to just these big alternates because of how many deep receptions that he gets. It's the same with Rashid Shaheed. Where he is another guy who can just go 50 yards over his prop line. You compare that to a guy like Chris Godwin, for instance. Like Chris Godwin just doesn't have as much variance. He doesn't get as many deep targets. So I don't think the market is pricing in Olave's variance enough. I don't think the market is accounting for the amount of targets that he will get against his pass funnel defense. I think Olave goes for 120 plus at plus 600.
Okay, Lawrence?
Those are some gaudy numbers Chris Olave has had recently. And Jay already talked about your hair, so I won't steal that one. But hey, nice shirt.
Thanks.
Connor.
Thank you.
Nice little watch you got there.
Thank you.
And,
I like this segment.
Hey, yeah, so there you go. Rashee Rice, come to the altar, please. Help me out here. I'm going to go alt line for Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice, my man. Rashee Rice for the struggling Chiefs offense. I'm going to go alt line, 100 yards at plus 330 right now. He hasn't had 100 yards in his last 5 games. However, he's averaged 10 targets in those 5 games. Like, there's nobody else. As bad as the Kansas City offense played last week, Rashee Rice still had his 12 targets. Cincinnati here, bottom 5 pass defense. We talked about George Pickens earlier. Look what he did to the Bengals last week. 4 for 195, 2 touchdowns. The week before that, Justin Jefferson, 7 for 84. Jordan Addison, 6 for 111 and 2 touchdowns. So the Bengals defense, they just getting lit up, my man. Even go back a week, Pittman had himself 95 yards. So, Connor, I beggeth you here today, take these 100 Rashee Rice receiving, y'all about to say receiving yards, receiving Rice yards.
That's good.
There we go, right? At plus 330, that's my take.
These are awesome, really fun receiving props to ladder bet. All the way you showed from about 63 for each of them, all the way to the 100, 120 for you, Jay. Listen, history is on Olave's side, and you've hit big on this. I think you've hit our biggest show bet we've ever had with Olave's or at least one of the biggest we've ever had. It all comes down to this for me. Do I put my faith in Patrick Mahomes, which the Chiefs' offense looks broken right now?
Yes.
Or my faith in Derek Carr, who I quite frankly wouldn't trust to walk my dog if I asked him to?
Arguably, he's had the better career than Mahomes, though. When you factor in Super Bowls and everything.
I'm going to go with Rashee Rice. He's due for the 100-yard game, although, Jay, I like the better odds there. Lawrence, you in this one for pickup lines. Keep an eye on both of these this week. If you want to have some fun, these are huge odds. Place a bet on each of these. That's it for us. For Lawrence, for Jay, a happy birthday to Matthew. I'm Connor. Watch Fantasy Football pregame on Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern with these guys. Good luck in your fantasy championships.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.